Episode 106.
Mm.
Indeed.
In three, two, one, clickety clack. We are
Okie
live.
dokie. Did you press your record button? All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. This is episode 106 of the Laravel News Podcast. We've got some news, we've got some updates, we've got some packages, just like always. But before we do that, Mr. Dorinda, how's life in the down under?
Life is good. Life is very quiet and calm. Well, I say quiet and calm
No, not
because
true. You
Laracon
have
is
a
over.
1 year old that is, or no, sorry, is it 1 year old? I'm interrupting you, I
He's
know.
17
But you have
months
a
old.
walker. You
He's
have a
a walker.
walker,
Yep. Yeah, he
bro.
while we were in Sydney for Laracon, he kind of stumbled a couple of steps, and then when he noticed that we saw him walking, he quickly sat down and was like, if they know I can walk, they're not going to carry me everywhere anymore. But yeah, we got back and he was sort of, for about a week, didn't really show any interest in wanting to do it again. And then we figured that we could like make him stand up. And if we could sit him on our lap and get him to stand up, then he'd be more inclined to walk. So he took like 3 or 4 steps between us, Rhea and I, and then 3 or 4 steps back. And then as he turned around, I would shuffle back a little bit and then he's walking further and further. And then the next thing we know, he's just like turned and walked off through the house and he's gone. And so everything's pretty much over now. We've torn down his
Yep.
little baby cage and opened up
Yep.
the whole house, which is glorious for us because now there's actually room in our living room again, which is nice.
Yeah.
17 months later. So yeah,
It
it's
seems funny,
pretty.
doesn't it seem kind of like opposite now? It's like it seems like now that he's walking, you'd like have the cage up. You'd be like, no,
No,
no, no,
there's
no,
not
no.
enough room. He
You're
gets
too
real
quick.
angry. Yeah.
Yeah, that
He
makes
gets from
sense.
one side to the other. So give him room. And it was great yesterday because he was walking. He didn't do it for very long, maybe 10 minutes. And then he sort of had enough of it. And then he had a nap for about an hour and a half. And then Rhea and I went out last night for the first time in months and saw a stand-up
Yep.
comic, which
That's
he was
parenthood.
hilarious, by the way. And then after that, we were a bit worried because we left him with my dad. And my dad, he's here during the day when one of us is here, and he'll look after him. Change, he won't change his nappy, he won't feed him his bottle, give him his bottle or anything like that. So we were a bit nervous about leaving him, but he went to sleep just before my dad got here last night, and he slept until 6 o'clock this morning. So all's well that ends
Nice.
well. So
That's awesome,
it's
man.
good that he's moving around now because he's much more likely to tire himself out probably.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty cool. Seeing that video of him walking
Yeah,
around though. That was awesome. Very cool.
he's out of control. He's absolutely out of control.
Yeah. Yes, yes. I can just see it in his little eyes. He
Mm.
is his father's son and he's going to cause death and destruction anywhere he goes.
You tell him no, and he looks over his shoulder, and you look at him, you're like, no, and he's just like smiling. He's like, and then he does it anyway. He's like a cat.
Yeah.
The cat, you like tell the
Oh,
cat don't do that, and
totally.
the cat just pushes it. Yeah, exactly
Yeah.
like that.
Oh my
So
word.
now we don't ever have to have a cat because we've got a kid.
There
The
you
cat
go.
probably would have been cheaper, to be honest.
Yeah, I can say that definitively. Yes, the
Yeah,
cat would have been cheaper.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, hopefully all of you out there in wherever you are having a wonderful week. Start to your week. Let's go ahead and jump into releases. So we've got 6.4.1 that was released. Let's see, when was it released? Actually, doesn't have it in the notes.
October
Paul
30th
Redmond.
or
Was
thereabouts.
that
I think
what
it
the
would have been
date
the
is?
29th. It would have been
Okay,
in line with the releases
gotcha.
every Tuesday.
Okay,
Every Tuesday.
every Tuesday. That's true. So they released 6.4.1 with a few changes. One of them was from our very own Mr. Michael Dorinda, which is a scheduled task skipped event. So this fires on a skipped scheduled command. So basically what the deal is if you have a scheduled command in your kernel and you have a conditional constraint on it, a truth constraint is what I don't know if the docs call it that. Is that what the
Hmm.
docs call it,
Yeah.
truth constraint? So if you have a when statement or something like that, which accepts a closure, and then if it returns true, it will end up running the scheduled task, and if it does not return true, then it will skip it. There was no easy way to know whether a task was skipped or not. So this new scheduled task skipped event fires on a skipped scheduled command. So that's how that works. Next, we have a new error message. Connection is no longer usable, which was added to the list of errors related to a lost database connection on MS SQL, so Microsoft SQL Server. And then lastly, we have the file system and file system adapter now have a missing method, which is the inverse of exists, right? So instead of having to say not exists, you can now just say storage : missing and then specify the name of the file, which is handy. I just had to do this last week, actually.
Yeah.
So there we go. I think there's a couple other little ones, other little items, but not much. So I think that's pretty much it for 6.4.1. We also have 6.5, which was released. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes, indeed. First of all, we have a new lazy collection remember method, which remembers any enumerated values and will not pull them from the source when enumerated again. I guess if you call the same method, it's sort of caching it, I suppose. If you use user cursor remember and you haven't run any queries as yet, you run user all the values get pulled from the database. If you run user all again, we've got the user from the remembered cache rather than having to query it again. So if you're not worried about being able to fetch the data from the database over and over again, you're happy to just grab it from from memory. Using the remember is a good way to avoid constantly hitting your database. I don't know how often you would call all like that, or run the query over and over again in the same execution context in a Laravel application, but it's there if you do need it.
Yeah, that's pretty handy.
Next, 2 new string methods were added to the Illuminate Support str class. The first is an after last, and the second is a before last. So you can get the string after the last, for example, / if you're wanting to get the base name of a full class path. So if you had app / notifications / tasks / task updated, if you passed that as the value to the string after last method, followed by a / or 2 backslashes because you need to escape them, it will give you the string after the last /. If that makes little to no sense to you, obviously that will be in the show notes for you to peruse later. Next, the query builder now has an exists or and a doesn't exist or method, which allows you to define a callback when the condition is false. So if you had a user dossiers, which is fancy, I suppose, user dossiers where null closed at doesn't exist, or you can pass that a closure, and then you can return a 422 in there as some kind of validation error, obviously, or you handle that condition where something doesn't exist fairly easily in your query. And lastly, there's a new unless condition which has been added to custom Blade if directives. For example, a custom env example from the Blade documentation allows you to use env, else, and then env. So you can additionally use the unless variant of this condition to avoid strange if-else scenarios. That looks like it would be fairly handy, but if you would like some more context around what that is, again, that will be in the show notes.
So just for my benefit, I did browse over that quickly, but if you're making your own custom Blade directive, like in this case, env, right, where you're checking to see what the env of the application is, so you'd say env production or something like that. Does it automatically prefix those now with so before was it if env, it would automatically make that for you, that if version of it?
I don't think so. I think this is just some custom handling for it, perhaps. But yeah, okay. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
No problem.
Hang on a minute. Yeah, I guess this is doing some automatic. I didn't scroll to the second part of the example, which says now instead of doing all of that stuff where you've got your own custom directives, you can just do unless env and just mash it all together into one thing, and Laravel will figure it out for you.
Cool.
Yeah, more context for that obviously will be in the show notes.
Yeah. Okay. I think that actually takes it all the way through all the updates that we had. So we are now on to packages, and everyone's favorite human, Mr. Paul Redmond, has gotten an interesting one here, which is the Laravel validation rules, which is a GitHub organization containing a collection of useful validation rules that you can pull into any of your projects quickly. And so you don't have to write them yourselves, because all of us have to write these a million times across many apps. So here are some of the validation rules that are included. So color, which currently supports hex colors,
and
country codes. What's it, and spelled correctly? You said.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's COLOUR, color. You know what? The other thing actually I saw the other day was one of the guys I work with is from Hungary, and he was spelling yogurt, and he spelled it yogurt,
Yeah.
YOGHURT. Yeah.
There's
No,
like there's a
you
few
don't
different
spell it.
ways to spell it. We can get Greek yogurt here, and it's
Ah.
spelled YOGHOURT, which I think is
Oh,
just
jeez.
taking the piss.
Oh my. Yeah, probably. It's a bit too pompous for me. It's like let's just see how many vowels we can add in
Yeah.
here.
Hmm.
Let's just see what the Aussies will tolerate. We're Greek after all. We can
That's
put as
right.
many vowels as we want in there.
That's
Yo
exactly right.
heard.
Yeah.
Yes. So we have color. So color is one of the validation rules. We have country codes. We have credit cards, IP addresses, both IPv4 and 6. I'm just kidding. I don't
Hey.
know. It doesn't specify, but I'm sure probably both. Phone numbers, subdomains, time zones, U.S. states, and Canadian provinces, both. And it includes full text and abbreviation as well. So, like, you could pass in Utah, or you could pass in UT, or you could pass in Alberta, or you could pass in BC, whatever. Um, so there's all different types of validation rules there for you, so
Mhm.
you can check that out. In the show notes, I actually don't have the link to it. It is Laravel-validation-rules.github.io is the page where you can find
Hmm.
it.
There's a whole bunch of
Um,
them.
yeah, tons of them, lots and lots and lots of them. It's kind of like the
Just
notifications thing,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah. In the same
Yeah, there's
vein.
there's a ton of them. Yeah, exactly. It's basically just like, hey, you need validation rules. Here's a bunch of them. Yeah.
I might have to have a look at that because we've got our own custom phone number thing that handles Australian phone numbers. It handles validation, but it also handles presentation and normalizing into E164 format and things like that. So,
Yeah. Okay. So
um,
tell me about this E164. Is this just like what does that stand for? Do you know? Any idea?
E164 is just the international standard for phone numbers. So, if you in our legacy database, phone numbers are stored as integers, which means,
Yeah.
like in Excel, if you put a phone number in there, a mobile phone number starts with a zero in Australia, so 0412345678.
Okay.
If you take that from a post and put it in the database, the leading zero will get truncated. So your phone number will end up
That
in
makes
there
sense.
as
Yeah.
41234567 which is no good.
Not correct.
So
Yeah.
phone numbers store as a string, um, store it as a varchar, store it as a, depending on, if for in Australia, the maximum length for a phone number is, I think, 13 digits. So, you would store 13. And then the E164 format, we basically take whatever the user gives us, whether they've got spaces in there, whether they've put parentheses in there, whether they've put brackets. We strip anything that's not a number because it's not a phone number. We don't really have, like 1-800 go Laravel or anything like that. We don't typically have words or letters in our phone numbers. I mean, even though
Sure.
it's,
Yeah.
they're
We don't
just
either.
translated
Yeah.
to numbers anyway. So, strip all that stuff out and then you get a phone number. And then, if you've got a phone number, so we have a prefix in South Australia is the number 8. So if you've got 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, E164 format would basically go, okay, we need that to be fixed. So we'd put 61 at the front, which is the country code. Then we put another 8 for shits and giggles, and then there. So
Do
you'd
you do a
have that.
plus in front of it? Is there a plus in front of it too?
The plus is implied at that point. The
Okay.
E164 doesn't have the plus in it. So, and that means that the numbers are always stored in exactly the format.
Yeah, sure.
Stored in exactly the same format, which means when they come out of the database, they're much easier to format. And then we handle putting, parentheses in there and spacing it out into what we would consider to be a normal number, which would be the area code. So 08 in parentheses, then a space, then 4 digits, then a space, then 4 digits. So wherever possible, I would recommend, normalizing and storing in a consistent format. E164 is easy because it's an internationalized standard and it will handle phone numbers everywhere. So, and then presentation is just a matter of either using a presenter or a decorator or even just a model accessor, depending on the size of your model. So plenty of options there, but there's a free fire emoji tip for you. Normalize your phone numbers and make life easier.
Yeah, it seems like it would make sense to store them as E164. No, we don't do that. No, we don't do that. We just, we just chuck them in whatever we want, and then we E164 them after. So we do like a presenter on,
Mm.
I don't know. I'd probably call it a mutator or whatever, right? But
Yeah.
or no, an accessor. But
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't. It's not a great way to do it, but it works.
Yeah.
So I digress. Anyway, yes, all those validation rules are in there, and you can check those all out.
Yeah. And if you're
Okay,
creating your own validation rules, maybe consider contributing back to that GitHub organization.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, no, great idea. My dog's going to bark in just a minute here, probably because my wife just got home. So apologies for the dog barking in the background, and maybe for a garage door opening. My
Beep,
apologies.
beep.
Girls' night, right? You know, girls got to get out every once in a while.
Nice.
It is 11 o'clock. This is probably the latest she's been home in who knows? I don't know.
We got home last night. It was
Crazy ladies.
just before 10 o'clock, and we said to my dad, "Get out. We're going to bed."
Get out. We're going to bed.
10
Oh, my
10
word.
o'clock was way past our bedtime.
Dude, I fell asleep at like 8:30 this week one time. I
wonderful.
was like, it actually was wonderful. But it was one of those moments. I was like, I'm getting old. I'm getting so
Yeah.
old.
So Eli would
But I like
typically
just
wake at
passed out.
6.
Of
Eli
course, I woke
typically
up
wakes
before
at
that.
6, and then I'll let Ree sets her alarm for 7:30, so she gets a bit extra sleep in the morning. She goes, "You're a morning person," but then she yells at me when I fall asleep on the couch. So there's no winning. I have to be up at the start of the day and at the end of the day.
Hey, man, that's how it works. I once heard a man say that, well, what did he say? He said, men are supposed to be exhausted at the end of the day. He's like, can you imagine the destruction that a guy full of energy like would have at the end of a day? Like he was just like, dude, I'm not stopping. I'm just keep going. Yeah, we're meant to be exhausted. Okay. I digress. Moving on. Okay, so we have a REST client inside of your Laravel projects. So I think we're on to you on this one.
Laravel Compass is a package by David H. Cianturi. I don't know if that was Italian, but that was my best interpretation of your last name, David. I apologize. Providing a REST client inside your Laravel project. Laravel Compass is an elegant REST assistant for the Laravel framework that you can use to test API calls and create API documentation. It provides endpoints automatically for get, post, put, patch, delete, various auth mechanisms, and other utility endpoints based on Laravel routes in your project. It provides an SPA backend experience with your routes preloaded. That's right. It will automatically provide endpoints based on Laravel route definitions. If you ever use Postman, the Laravel Compass UI will feel very familiar. It looks very nice.
Yeah, it looks almost exactly the same. Yeah, it looks really good though.
So I've not used it, but it certainly looks interesting, especially if you're building APIs in Laravel. Being able to stub them out and test them and all that kind of stuff is very helpful. I will actually be building an open API one this week. Fingers crossed I get some time to actually knuckle down on it. So I might check this out. But you can learn more about this package, get full installation instructions, and view the source code on GitHub at David H. Cianturi, SIANTURI/Laravel-Compass. Link will be in the show notes.
So I'm just making sure I understand this here. So basically what this does is it almost builds like a Postman backend for you automatically based on your routes.
That's what it looks like, yeah.
Okay, interesting. That's pretty cool actually. Yep, that's pretty cool. I have two, even if it was just loaded that dev, like even if it was just loaded for your dev side of things, I think would that still be useful? It would still be useful.
Yeah.
I feel like it'd be a little bit scary if I had it like on my live production server. I could just let anybody kind of test endpoints. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm sure you could protect it somehow, but yeah, that's really interesting. Because like I love Postman. I use Postman all the time, but sometimes it's hard to remember like, okay, what was the argument order? What was the, I have to go grab one of the API tokens, all that stuff. So this could be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, David. Okay, kind of going along with that, we have a Laravel REST API response builder. So the REST API response builder for Laravel is a package by Marcin Orlowski.
You made a terrible mistake.
I did?
You should have done the other one. You should have read the other one.
I think I would have been.
Here you go. Here's one for free. Marcin Orlowski.
Oh my gosh. Yep, you can have it. For building JSON API responses, according to the author, the package helps you with things like data conversion and localization. So here's the description that it has. Response Builder is written for REST API developers by a REST API developer and is based on my long-lasting experience on both sides, API dev and API consumer, of a variety of REST APIs. It's lightweight with simple to use public methods covering multiple potential use cases, on the fly data conversion, localization support, automatic error message building, support for chained APIs, and hopefully exhaustive documentation. So basically, this allows you or helps you to build responses out for your Laravel REST API. So I think sometimes it's hard to, you have to, I know you're probably dealing with this right now, right? Like, what sort of standard are you going to use for your REST API responses? Like, how are you going to handle like pagination, and how are you going to return all these different relations, these different related models? And are they going to have to make additional calls, or are you going to load those in at the same time? Or like, how does that work, right? And so basically what he does here is he provides for you some sensible defaults, I believe, based on his experience doing API development, both on the development and the consumer side of things, and then tries to make it a little bit easier for you to build out those successful responses as well as error responses, because you have to handle those as well. So what are those going to look like, right? And then, of course, he has documentation on that as well. So even if you don't like subscribe to the entire package, like if you don't like subscribe to his methodology for all of it, I'm sure you could probably get some good ideas out of it, and check that out. So yeah. Thanks very much, Marcin Orlowski.
Good job.
Thanks. All right. So it looks like the next one that we have is HTTP client that handles retries and logging. Now, I'm just going to go out on a limb here. I bet you Paul Redmond is dealing with some API stuff right now.
Certainly seems that way.
Because he's doing a lot of API packages here, right? We've got REST clients inside your Laravel projects, REST API response builders, HTTP clients that handle retrying and logging. Wow, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about this one. What do we got?
Yeah,
this is a pretty cool one, by the way.
Gustavo Ocanto created a HTTP client on top of Guzzle that handles retries and logging. Typically, you'd have some code like the following. You'd have, I don't know that I have a do while, but yeah, you could have a do while and have your query inside there, and then increment a retry counter if you don't have any responses. With this client, however, you can achieve similar by just saying new client and then retry 5 or 10 or however many times you want to retry, and then get whatever the endpoint is, and then you can on retry even specify some additional functionality. So you've got some granular control there. So if you have a API that is perhaps a little bit flaky sometimes, and you need to give it a second or third poke, definitely check out this package. You can learn more about it and get the installation instructions and view the source code at gocanto/http-client. Links for that as well will be in the show notes.
You think that's what it would be then for? It's just like something that's like, oh yeah, we just randomly get these failures or something?
Yeah, we have our phone system will on occasion just not respond. So we just have to try. I mean, we try every 15 seconds to hit it up, but we don't. If it fails, it's okay. We can wait 15 seconds to get live call status and things like that. But
sure.
For things that are more likely to fail, or that you're, maybe you only poll it once every 10 minutes or once every 15 minutes. If you need to have a response and you can reasonably expect that it will fail the first time, then yeah, definitely having some kind of built-in retry functionality which hides that gnarly do while statement, then yeah, definitely give us a go.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, this looks like one that might be interesting for you, actually. I know you were talking about multi-domain support the other day. Tell me the situation that you've got with that. Let's talk about that for a second. So what's going on with that?
So you and I were talking before the show about moving our infrastructure from our old legacy hardware to our new environment, which I think we've talked about on this show previously. It's quite extensive and very expensive, and we need to use it. But in doing that, we've got some parts of the business that have migrated to the new corporate network, which links all of our offices together, and some parts of our office are still using the older network, which doesn't have access to that. So we actually need to support our CRM application on 2 different domains. So we've got CRM, our old CRM URL, and we've got the new URL. They both point to different IPs. There's some handling at the edge of the network to sort of VPN between the two, but for all intents and purposes, running on two different domains. The end goal is to move to the new one, but in the meantime, we need to support the same exact application on two domains at the same time.
So
And
yeah,
the way that Laravel handles generating URLs will go based on your app URL. So if you use the URL helper
sure.
or the asset helper, then it will use the URL that's defined in your env or your configuration file. Now, where that is a problem is where you come from the other URL and you click a link that's been generated, that's a redirect or whatever that's been generated with the configured URL. And so then they get redirected to a URL that they don't have access to. So we worked around it by just grabbing the HTTP host out of the server super global in the request, which is not ideal, but now that
it's
I've
a temporary
seen this package,
solution. So
it's a temporary solution, yeah. So it can just stay there until we move anyway, and then we'll rewrite those things. I think the route helper does behave properly, but these are redirects to legacy parts of our application that don't have routes defined, unfortunately. So a bit of rigmarole there. But the Laravel multi-domain package is a package by at Geche, Gecche, that allows a single Laravel installation to work with multiple HTTP domains. There are many cases in which different customers use the same application in terms of code, but not in terms of database, storage, and configuration. This package gives a very simple way to get a specific env file, a specific storage path, and a specific database for each customer. So maybe not for us because we have a slightly different setup. However, once you finish the installation and setup outlined in the README, you can use the package commands. So they're just artisan commands to manage the domains. So you've got a PHP artisan domain :add, and then your domain, and add it again for any subsequent domains. You can remove domains. And when you add the domain, the .env configuration file is created for the specific domains. So if you add a domain site1.com, you'll get .env.site1.com. You can list the domains using domain list. I wonder if this works in a similar way to Matt Stauffer has got the gislog, and he was when there was a while back when I had a discussion with him about supporting custom domains on that, because he was talking about potentially monetizing gislog. And so you could redirect from jacobbennett.com to gislog.co/Jacob Bennett. But to use their own custom domains, we kind of looked at some ways of fudging the domain handling in Laravel based on where you were coming from. So you'd have to look into it, but I wonder if this has a similar approach. So you can definitely learn more about the package. The link will be in the show notes. And like so many of the packages and articles and things like that we talk about on the Laravel News, the package was submitted to our Laravel News links section, which is a place the community can post packages and tutorials around the Laravel ecosystem. You can follow on Twitter at Laravel Links, or you can submit your own links at laravel-news.com/links.
Very cool. We've got a tutorial here, and then we've got a quick note from Eric on events that you have going on. So we'll talk about that in a second. I'm going to look at this tutorial real quick, which I don't know how many times this particular author has posted on Laravel News. It looks like he's got 2 different posts on here. I was going to say the last time he submitted the post was in 2017, because I haven't seen his name come up very much. But it's Dulio Palacios. And so he wrote a blog post for us called 7 Tips to Prevent, Detect, and Fix Bugs in Your Code. And he makes some really common, really common sense suggestions for how we can improve your code and how you can make sure that you're not going to write bugs and make it easier to fix them when you do. So I'm just going to read through them because these are good. So we have assigned descriptive names to your variables, functions, parameters, and methods. So a lot of times, or in the past maybe, when I was first learning, I felt like this need to make short variable names for some reason. I don't know exactly why. So you'd remove like vowels or something. You can still read it, or you abbreviate things, and that's typically not helpful. It used to be useful back when the size of the memory on the machine was limited, and so you really had to be conscious of how many characters you were using. I've talked to some of the guys who are neckbeard dudes at my job, and they tell me, yeah, back in the day we had to use single letter variables because you couldn't use you didn't have enough memory, whatever.
Yeah.
It's not the case anymore. So instead of saying REQ for request, just use the full word request, and that's good. That's one thing. You should be using a standard like PSR2, or I believe the new standard is PSR12. That's what Laravel is now sticking to, which Style CI updated recently, and all of my code, like across all of my code bases, whenever I'd make a pull request, it's like 300 changes.
Yeah.
Because it reordered. It changed how we ordered the namespacing. So it used to be by length. Yeah, the use statements. It used to be by length, and now it's alphabetical, which I think makes more sense. It doesn't look as pretty, but it makes more sense.
Yeah.
So it reorders all those every time I push something in. But PSR2 or PSR12, you should definitely be following some sort of coding standard. You should reduce the number of temporary variables that you're using. This is like one of those pet peeves, I think, of Adam Wathan. He's like a huge, like, no temporary variables sort of guy. Don't use magic numbers. This is an interesting one that we've been using a lot recently, which is zero magic numbers. Like, you should either be using like some sort of enum class, like not in your database, but like if you have multiple types of something that are all related to a particular thing. So like, for example, in an app that me and Michael are working on, we have task check-in type. And then it has constants that are assigned on that task check-in type that we can then reference in multiple classes. And we don't have to have magic strings floating around. That way, if we just change it, it only has to change in one spot. So those are super helpful. Not using magic numbers, instead using constants in your classes, either in your classes or having specified classes that will handle kind of some of those values for you. Divide and conquer. This is basically just encouraging you to extract methods for groupings of code, right? Object-oriented programming asks us to group data and functions in one place, which is typically in classes, but you can also take all the related pieces of information or pieces of code in your in a controller method or whatever, and you can extract them just to little classes if you find that, or not little classes, I'm sorry, little methods. If you find that it justifies the class, you can do that as well. But those help to clean up your code quite a bit. And if you have like some conditional sort of stuff, the one that he has here is he has a method called add delivery cost, which will return the amount with the delivery cost, but only if the amount does not exceed the delivery threshold. Otherwise, it returns the original amount. Well, you can imagine if that logic was like in a controller, like you have a bunch of, you're not what's it called, declarative versus imperative, right? Declarative programming, I think, is like you're saying what you're doing, right? And imperative, or maybe it's not, maybe imperative isn't the right word, but you're basically doing it all, right? So instead of saying get the delivery cost, you're saying go ahead and grab the amount and then check it against this thing and then blah blah blah, right? Okay. Defaulting to simple solutions. So they're basically, what is number 6? We're almost done, folks, I promise. Which is basically keep it simple. Keep it simple. And then lastly, write automated tests. I thought this was interesting. So he said accountants follow a practice called double entry bookkeeping. It's a method that requires them to enter all transactions twice. This basically makes sure that they don't enter the wrong number. This is sort of like when you're putting your password in, they require you to do password validation. So writing unit tests requires us to write the code twice, once to define each test and a second time to write the actual implementation of the code. Many developers complain about this because it forces us to work double, but by writing the code twice, we reduce the possibility of making the same mistake twice. And in the same way, if we make 2 different mistakes, tests are likely to fail. So this is good. This is good. So some really solid suggestions. And, we've got a lot of these things out there right now. I know Jason McCurry has some really, really good stuff on these sort of same topics. Has some really good courses out there. So this is something you're interested in. Read this blog post over a little more carefully. Take a look at some of JMac's courses. And I'm sure it could benefit you. Yeah. What Eric have to say about those events real quick? Michael, what do we have on that? And then we had, what was he talking about there?
Last year, Eric launched a new site called Laravel Events with the goal of allowing the community to submit their conferences and meetup events and things like that would appear on the homepage of Laravel News and in the weekly Laravel News newsletter. One of the original goals was to have an image with each event, and this quickly became a bottleneck as Eric was spending too much time creating them for events that didn't have one, or fixing up ones that did that weren't great and things like that. And by the time that he got around to doing that, the event had already finished. So to help combat this, Jason Beggs graciously submitted a PR to remove the image requirement, and now you can quickly add your meetup or conference, and the approval will be that much faster because there's no need to, fix up the image in there. So if you run a meetup or you attend a meetup for Laravel or PHP all around the world, be sure to check out Laravel events. They're at, laravelevents.com. We will have a link to the article about it and Laravel events itself in the show notes.
There we go. As we do on occasion, there are some really good community links out there. So I'm just going to read the titles of a few of them. Mocking and testing PHP traits in a Laravel application. Reusing a controller method for multiple actions in Laravel. Localizing a Laravel app using Vue.js and Inertia.js without any dependencies. Streamlining your code deployment. Why you should stick to the default Laravel architecture. Why you should never stick to the default Laravel architecture. Just kidding. There's not actually two opposing blog posts, but there are differing opinions. Okay, so all I'm saying is I'm just encouraging everybody to kind of go take a look at some of these community links. There are some really good contributions out there that you might not hear about because there's just so much on Twitter. There's so much on Twitter to look through. But Laravel News does a great job of taking these, curating them, and giving you an opportunity to look at what some other people are doing in the community who might not necessarily have as many followers or might not have as much exposure on the interwebs. So check those out. All right, this was episode 106. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you like the show, please feel free to rate us up in your podcatcher of choice. Show notes for this episode will be at laravel-news.com/podcast/106. And of course, we always love to hear from you. Hit us up on Twitter at Jacob Bennett, at Michael Dorinda, or at Laravel News. If you'd like to sponsor the show, we'd love to have you. We've had a sponsor for the last couple of weeks. It's been great. We would love to have you on the show as well. I have a couple people I'm going to reach out to, actually. There's a couple folks that I think could really... Actually, you know what? Some of these people we just want to have on, I think. So like, for example, Marcel and Frake, I would love to have them on the show just to talk about Flare and what's the other one? Ignition. Thank you. Flare and Ignition. Let's talk about that. Marcel with Tinkerwell. I want to talk about that. There's some cool stuff there. And also, we had talked about possibly having some of those as giveaways for the show. Tinkerwell, that is. Maybe licenses for some of these other SaaS applications. I'm positive those guys would love to give some of those things away, and we would love to give them away. So we'll try and do that in the next couple episodes here. Have some of these people on for the end of the year. A little Christmas gift from us to you. And there we go. Cool. All right. We got anything else?
Nothing else.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye. Signing off.